Okay, so I'm going to start this video off with a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Season 2 of The Mandalorian and are trying to avoid spoilers, I'll leave a link up here to a video on the history of the Razor Crest if you want to watch that instead. This video is going to be fairly heavy on spoilers, so I recommend clicking off now. Okay, so during Season 2 of The Mandalorian, we see, unfortunately, that the Razor Crest is destroyed. And with the loss of the Razor Crest, our hero Din does not have a starship anymore. So I figured today we could speculate on what he may end up using as his personal starship from this point on. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, the Razor Crest is destroyed by Moff Gideon's modified Arquitens-Class light cruiser. Its destruction caught all of us pretty off guard, but it ultimately raises the question, what comes next? So today we'll look at a few ships that I think are possible replacements. So let's jump right into this with the first ship that I think is a viable candidate, and that is the Slave One. That's right, Boba Fett's iconic ship. The Slave One served as the personal vessel for Jango Fett after he stole it, and would be handed down to his son Boba Fett once Jango had been killed on Geonosis. For most of its existence, it was utilized by the notorious bounty hunter Boba Fett, as he went around making a name for himself in the galaxy. It would be seen not just during Attack of the Clones, before the Battle of Geonosis, but also during the Imperial occupation of Cloud City depicted in The Empire Strikes Back, and immediately following that it would end up at Jabba's palace on Tatooine, where it would end up staying for an unknown amount of time, before we see it in The Mandalorian. In The Mandalorian, we see it being used by Boba Fett, who had survived his brush with the Sarlacc, and it seems to be serving as the personal vessel of Boba Fett at this point. And with Boba Fett getting his own show, it would make sense for the Slave One to follow him there. However, they have done a lot of work setting up the Slave One and building out its interior for The Mandalorian. So why exactly do I think the Slave One could be a viable possibility? Well, we know that Din is already familiar with the Slave One from the last couple episodes. He's seen it piloted by Boba Fett, and he's come to, at least for the past couple weeks, call it home. So it would make some sense that he may come into possession of that vessel. However, I do think there is one major obstacle in the way of this theory, and that is Boba Fett himself. Just like how I assume the armor has some sentimental value to Boba being his father's, I'm sure the ship does as well. Which is probably the strongest argument against this being a replacement for the Razor Crest. It simply seems out of character for Boba to be willing to give up his iconic ship. Especially since we know that Boba is getting his own show, it would make sense for them to want to put the Slave One in there. So let's talk about another option. The Slave 2, specifically a Pursuer-class enforcement ship. Now, I've seen this one thrown around a lot simply because it was a replacement for the Slave 1 in Legends, and there really isn't any strong evidence in favor of this being Din's future ship. However, I do think it is a possibility seeing the role it played in Legends, and the fact that it is technically in canon being mentioned in the Rise of Skywalker novelization. Now let's talk about the next option, the Mandalorian Kom'Rk-Class fighter transport. Now, obviously this one stands out because this is the only vessel on this list of Mandalorian origin. We see Bo-Katan still has one of these in her possession when they go to meet up with her in Chapter 16. So it is possible, if Din is sticking with Bo, that this may become the hero vessel at least for a short period of time. And it is entirely possible that one of these vessels, since there are many in this class, could be what Din ends up using for the foreseeable future. After all, it would fit with his inherited Mandalorian history. However, I think Din's use of the Kom'Rk-Class is entirely dependent on his relationship with Bo. If him and Bo have a falling out, possibly over the situation with the Darksaber, it's entirely possible that he may not have access to these vessels, and that would basically wipe this option off the table. But because this show does appear to be leading up to the liberation of Mandalore, I do think it is a possibility. There's two more options though that I think we need to discuss. The first is sort of the obvious, the one I'm kind of hoping for. I hope that they design something totally new to fill the role. I love the ship design in Star Wars, and I always want to see more of it. So if there's any way to get us more starships, I'm all for it. So personally, I hope the replacement for the Razor Crest is something totally new. All of these suggestions are very possible, and it may be something we've already seen, but I do think they'll probably just design something new. If not for the sake of pleasing people like me who want more starships, then to give them something else to sell merchandise for. And the last possibility is the possibility that there isn't a replacement. Maybe from this point on, Din's the part of a larger crew. Maybe the crew operating Gideon's captured cruiser. Maybe he'll just stay with this group of Mandalorians for the rest of the show. Basically, it's entirely possible that there is no Razor Crest replacement on the way. Now, like I mentioned before, I hope this isn't true because I would really like to see more ship designs, but I think it's possible that the show may shift its focus to the liberation of Mandalore, and this would require him to be a closer-knit group with the rest of the Mandalorians, and this could possibly tie him directly to a larger capital ship, something like the Arquitens Arquitens-Class light cruiser that they captured at the end of Chapter 16. And that Arquitens-Class cruiser was part of Moff Gideon's fleet. If you want to learn more about some of the Imperial forces that might still be loyal to Moff Gideon or the Empire at this point in the timeline, I'll leave a link up here to my video on how powerful Moff Gideon's forces actually were. And I want you to let me know down in the comments which of these vessels you hope replaces the Razor Crest. Do you want the Slave 1 because it's so iconic? Or would you prefer him to be flying something else? And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.